Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining Spirit Club. And today we have another guest. I'm getting into it. I'm getting into the guests, you guys. And you probably know this guest because I talk about her a lot and tag her a lot. She's my witchy bestie, intuitive astrologer, Gabrielle Celeste. Welcome,
Oh,
Gabrielle.
I love you, friend. How are you? Thank you for having me. I'm so excited about this and truly honored to be one of the first guests on your show.
I mean, I couldn't have it any other way, you know? I'm like, just to give you guys all a background, Gabrielle and I met in our intuitive training. What is it that you and Nicole call that?
I call it psychic school. She
Mhm.
does not call it that because I think it's triggering for her. So I don't know. I forget what she calls it, but I'm like, it's psychic school, guys.
Psychic school. We met in psychic school more than 2 years ago.
Hmm.
And Gabrielle and I started voice noting. I do think it was around October 2 years
Yeah.
ago. And we haven't stopped since, which is pretty incredible. And we have
It
met
is.
in person two, three
A couple
times.
times. Hmm.
Times.
Yeah.
Gabrielle is in California for all my Canadians listening. Um, and on top of being an astrologer and a psychic, Gabrielle also has a podcast, which we will be linking, called the Spiritual Sisters Podcast. And it is, it's what I got to work up to.
No, no way. You guys have to check out our episode with Angel. It was fantastic. And she's just a natural, gifted speaker. And I'm so excited for the downloads coming through in this episode.
Can you all tell that we love each other? We do. Okay, so today, everybody, so eclipse season, by the time this airs, starts the day this airs. And I know many of you in this community are, what do I want to call you? Astrology curious. And you probably hear a lot about eclipse season. You're like, what? What do people mean when they say that? Am I supposed to be afraid? All these types of things. So we thought, what a timely time to talk about eclipses with an actual astrologer. So, yeah. But before we get into that, we'll start with our um, routine guest questions, beginning with Gabrielle, what are your big three in astrology?
Well, thank you for asking. I am a triple water sign. She's a Cancer sun, Pisces moon, Pisces rising.
Heck yes, all the water. And when you say like triple water, for those who don't really know, what does it mean to have a lot of water in your chart generally?
Yeah, it means that you're meant to flow and surrender and trust at all times. And that is so hard to work through sometimes with just programming and the way, we're taught and brought up in schools and through the work system, but it in a general sense means really being in touch with your feelings and also feeling that of others as well. And so just having almost kind of like a subconscious but conscious awareness of what's going on around you at all times.
Mm-hmm. And are generally, would it be safe to say that often those with a lot of water in their chart will be more intuitive?
I think so. I might be a little biased, but I definitely think that's the case.
Well, I think, like you were saying, if you're feeling a lot, that feeling is really like translating into feeling what's going on in others and in your own path.
Certainly, and I can definitely speak to, I would say, the pros and cons of it, but it's also such
Mhm.
a gift to have that sense of awareness, and clairsentience was actually the first clair that came in for me.
Mm, interesting. I don't really have that
Mhm.
one. No, no
Really?
sentience over here. Mm-mm.
It's that double Taurus energy.
I guess so, I guess. But everyone, just so you know, I am a Cancer rising and I collect cancers. I always say this because, like, I don't know, something like 99% of the people closest to me have Cancer in their big three. And I'm like, there's something here. And you guys are going to notice because all my guests will have Cancer in their chart.
I love it. Hmm.
Except Shane. Shane's got absolutely like no water. I mean, we all have everything, but as far as like big placements in water signs, nada, nada.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
I feel it. Anyway, let's keep going. I could go.
Okay.
We could go all day.
We really could.
Okay, question number 2. Tell us about your morning routine.
Oh goodness, it's so extensive. The more that I've shifted into flowing in my feminine, I would say within maybe the last 8 to 10 months, it hasn't been as rigid, regimented, structured. But what I really like to do first thing is to take a couple deep breaths, call my energy back to myself, depending on where I was in the astral realm and in dream states. And so I'll do that. I also cleanse my energy before calling it back to myself, if that makes sense. So I'll almost put up like a filter and I'll just like kind of filter that energy through that little threshold because sometimes, our dream states, it's when we're most vulnerable. So that's very, very first thing I do. Then I'll get up, I'll brush my teeth, I'll use the restroom, I'll stretch, and then I'll do at least 5 minutes of meditation and a card pull just to set the energy and intention for the day, alongside also taking 10 deep breaths. Just to, I don't know, just feels like it makes a difference. I actually just started that a little bit fairly recently, I would say.
Mhm.
And then after that, I will have my water and vitamins, and I try to get some type of workout in, and then I go about my day working.
Heck yes. Oh, I love
Mhm.
that tip about filtering the energy you're calling back.
Totally.
Not something I thought of. Thank you for that. I wrote it down.
Okay.
And also, I wanted to add, Gabrielle's often on the Stairmaster in the morning, responding to voice notes. That's her time. So I can vouch that she's doing this.
I love my morning, voice notes from Angel. They really set my day up for success, and I genuinely mean that. I mean, we've been voice noting back and forth for 2 years, so tells you a lot.
We love our routines.
And we both we really do.
Well, good for you for putting more flow in because that is hard and it's not for everyone. Like some people, if they haven't played in the discipline first, and being in flow is like it's like too far on the other side of the spectrum. So, but that's right where you need to be for sure.
Thank you for saying that.
Okay, question number 3. Since we are all about self growth here at Spirit Club, share with the audience some of the most impactful teachers, mentors, coaches, whatever, authors that you've had so far.
Yeah, it's so interesting because we definitely I can share the names that are in this space that have been super impactful, but I was recently asked this on another podcast, and I would have to say, firstly, I would say my parents have been such teachers, my higher self, and then my friends and my family, immediate family around me. But with respect to teachers, coaches, mentors, I would say I started learning astrology with the spiritual gaze. Um, Brandon and Angel, shout out. And I hold a lot of love for them in my heart. And then also, I've taken a couple of classes and trainings with Anne Orderly. So she's another well known astrologer. And then, of course, nikkinovo. We know and love and have trained with her for our intuition training and that intuitive psychic component that we offer in our services. But in terms of like authors, I would say I read Gabby Bernstein's books when I first, had my awakening, and they really resonated. And I appreciate a couple of podcast hosts, and I appreciate their work. And I would say Lacey Phillips of To Be Magnetic for sure. So just to name a few.
Nice. And that's
Mhm.
really quite insightful of you to name your parents and those close to you as some of the biggest teachers because ain't it the friggin' truth?
Right?
Ain't it the truth?
We choose them for a reason.
Mhm. Okay, what are you currently letting go of? Speak it so that we can let it
I am trying to I feel like I'm actually in a really good place. I'm in what's referred to as the magic dark. So it's kind of like that season/period before your manifestations come in. And I feel like I've really grieved properly and in a healthy way the current identity and the life that I have. And I'm kind of just navigating this next shift, which includes a move and a partner and the next season and chapter of my business. And I just feel like for the first time and really I think it those around me can also speak to this and agree that I'm in surrender and trust and surrender and flow. So, I'm kinda just chilling and enjoying the energy of what it is to be in a personal year 9 in numerology, and that's just really leaning into the hard work that you've put into place the previous 8 years before, since numerology works in 9-year cycles. Um, so yeah, I'm just kinda hanging out until 2025 when we go into that 1-year baby.
You're doing so well at the surrender. I mean, this place that Gabby described, this in between, we've talked about a bit on this podcast. It can be really uncomfortable to be in, and you can want to control. And I've watched Gabby's arc of going from control to surrender, and like really truly being there. So that is the best. That's when you get in the juice.
Totally, yeah, and that's very feminine, I would have to say, like, the ends of the spectrum that is masculine, that is feminine, somewhere in between, and it's really wild to go through and experience each of those different energies on that spectrum. So
Hmm.
thank you for saying that as well.
I see you. Okay, and lastly, what are you calling in?
You know, I think I'm calling in that next version of self, whatever version that is and what that's supposed to look like, and just with open arms and embracing that and just navigating that next season with grace as well. So, yeah, probably just the next version of myself.
Okay, perfect. It has been said. It is cast.
And so it is.
So it is, guys. All right, let's get into some astrology talk. Um, let's start with you, though, Gabrielle. Let's let everybody get to know you a bit. So, share with us your story, how you got into astrology, your spiritual awakening, the whole sort of cycle of that.
Totally. Okay, so we could talk on and on, but I'll try to make it short and sweet because I know
Mhm.
we have some juicy things to cover in the midst of the eclipse season. But yeah, I'm Gabrielle Celeste, as Angel has so kindly shared, and I'm the co-host of the Spiritual Sisters podcast, and I run the business called Agua Astrology. And I launched my business officially in 2022, and previous to that, I had been reading for some time, kind of. In the closet without really sharing because I wasn't really ready to come out as an intuitive, but I think I've been intuitive my entire life. And um, my dad and my mom, most more my dad, I would say, who's also highly intuitive himself, he was always into astrology. And I remember when we were younger, there used to be this astrologer on, it's called Univision. It was one of those Spanish channels, and his name was Walter Mercado. And it would be like every night or every weekend, we would be in the living room and we would be watching just like what he had to share about each of the zodiac signs. And it would be in Spanish. And I was so fascinated as a child. And I was like, what is this? And then I had the very like traditional, typical programming where you have to go to school, you go to, you make something of yourself, because my parents were immigrants and they definitely worked through a lot of the root chakra topics and the scarcity mindset and having to really just establish the family here in California and within the States. So the path was going to school, and they were always like, just get your degree, you can do whatever you want, right? And now looking back, I'm like, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And that's why I actually studied business, because I'm like, what 18-year-old really knows what they want? So I went the practical route.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just, like, got a degree in something that I could apply. But I always knew that I really enjoyed studying systems and, like, I loved being organized, and it makes so much sense because I'm a 4/6, sacral generator, and 4/6s just innately have an understanding of, like, how systems work. Like, they could go through a manual, really understand certain things, so very technical, I would
Mm.
say. So and I'm sure you can relate being a
Mm.
4/6
I was
yourself,
like,
my
I
dear.
didn't know this about 4/6s, so thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, and then my Saturn return hits, and the Saturn return, for those of you who are unfamiliar, it's the astrological initiation slash induction into adulthood. And it
Mm.
doesn't happen until 27, but in the world we live in today, you're an adult at 18, right? So I was working a very like cookie cutter corporate job, was climbing the ladder on my way to being a board member by the time I was 40. And I found myself involved in working on it was a 4 to 5 year project that the company I was working for ended up having to owe the government $32 billion because they had committed like fraud, basically. And as a result of that investigation, it was like the last year, I found myself involved in an internal investigation, a part of the bigger investigation, and I was set up to be the fall guy for a multi-million dollar
Oh,
internal investigation, and that was my Saturn return, basically.
oh
So
my gosh. Epic. Okay.
you can't make that up, right?
No.
So, yeah, so that, like, really induced the spiritual awakening, and it's interesting because a year prior to that, I had had a pretty significant heartbreak, and that I was just like, "I'm just gonna do better for myself. I need to find something that, I can work through that's gonna allow me to just focus on me after just feeling, like, such deep emotions." And I realized that a lot of that inner work, that self-help, self-growth, inner improvement, it's pretty much spirituality. And that had actually been like the foundational work that prepared me for the chaos that was my Saturn return and being a fall guy for a multi-million dollar investigation. I'll pause there because I don't know if you have something to say because I could just keep talking, girl.
Well, I can only imagine especially at that age, the sheer like fear, anxiety, all that sort of thing when you get word of you being the fall guy, like this is something that's like, this is huge. This is huge.
Huge. Huge. And it was so interesting because alongside of that, I had my name, my good name, I would say, just smeared throughout the company. And I was accused of sleeping with my boss to climb the ladder, which is just like, the traditional whatever approach that they're going to use. And it's like, actually, I have a brain and I'm actually a smart girl. So I work really hard. This is actually why I'm in the position I'm in. But, anyways, all this to say, actually, I don't think I've ever shared in depth this much in my podcast on a podcast, but
Mm,
who cares? We're just gonna go
it's
for it
mine.
because,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna pull a Taylor Swift on and just go into detail through my artistry. But yeah, my boss was actually the one that set me up to be the fall guy because it was either me or him, and he wasn't gonna give up, his 300,000 plus salary, and he was gonna set himself up, to be safe. But in hindsight, I look at that experience and I was like, oh my gosh, it was such a gift because I would have never left on my own otherwise. And in that period of time when it all had happened, I was like, what is this? Like, this does not make sense. Like, what is going on? And I had a girlfriend that was studying Vedic astrology. And she was like, this, and this is happening, and this is why. And she showed me a chart, and I was like, oh my goodness. Like, it was the depths of astrology and what it could be. And from that moment on, I was hooked and I could not get enough. And because I was doing so much research and I was just like craving more, that period of time where you just
Mhm.
thirst for the knowledge and the
Bubble it up.
hunger.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Totally. I came across the podcast, the Spiritual Gaze podcast, and they're like, we're going to start teaching. And then I studied with them for a year. And, time passes, you take your courses, there comes a point where you're like, okay, it's time to start doing this in practice because there's two parts to anything. It's like studying as well as the application. And it's like, okay, then I knew that at that point I had enough readings and just intuitively felt within myself that it was time to start
Mhm.
astrology, and that's how she was birthed.
That's how it came to be. Oh my gosh, and I didn't know the part about your dad being into astrology as a child. Like, I'm like,
Mm.
your dad, something else. He's something else. He's on one of the early episodes of Spiritual Sisters. You guys gotta check him out. He's a cool guy.
Oh, he's today's his birthday, actually, a time of
Really?
drop. Mhm.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
Virgo. We
And
knew this. Virgo sun.
we love our Virgos. I collect Virgos and I collect
Mm,
Turians,
cool.
Tauruses as well. So to Angel, of course. And I actually he just had one of his readings, his second reading that I've gotten to him with one of the girls in our circle. So I'll have to keep you updated on how that
Okay.
goes.
Cannot wait. Cannot wait.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so a big part of your story then, your awakening and all that sort of thing, was your Saturn return.
Mhm.
And you described it as you're like becoming an adult. Can you give us a little more details for those who are listening who might be in it? How might they know? And what
Oh.
sort of things generally come with a Saturn return?
Totally. Okay, so Saturn return. Saturn takes about 27 to 30 years to orbit the sun. And when a planet makes a full orbit from the place at which it started at the exact moment of your birth, that's
Oh,
considered to be a return.
I see. Okay.
Um, mhm. And some planets move faster than others. And so, because Saturn is a slower moving planet, you're going to feel the buildup of the return for sure. You kind of get just like that core experience, the start, the kickoff of it at 27. And it has to do with the eclipses around 27, believe it or not. And then you experience the full on energy of the Saturn return between 28 and 30. And Saturn is known to be the lord of karma, the planet that represents, karma and what you're here to do in this lifetime. He represents father energy. But if you really lean into the Saturn return and work with him throughout that period, you will be rewarded. And if you're around that age, the first one, the second one's about 57 to 60. And then if you're lucky enough to live for the third, it's 87 to 90. I've never met anyone that's had their third, or at least have read for them, I should say. But it's
Mm,
so interesting. Yeah, because the themes that come up between the first and the second are very parallel in nature. And you're going to know if you're in it for sure.
mm. Okay. And so, it's kind of a like a call to healing, would you say? Like it's going to point out some things. I can say from experience that mine was really around, like I was leaving a really important partner who I'd been with for 7 years. I left a city I'd been living in for 7 years. I lost my job. um, so there was a lot of healing there around being brave enough to like be who I was. So, there were some pretty clear healing themes for me. Would you say that that's a big part of the Saturn return?
Absolutely. He is going to reorient you and put you on the path that you're meant to be on if you're not already. And for many, I would say most oftentimes than not, it's a little bit more of a challenging time
Hmm.
than it is positive. But I have seen some really beautiful moments of a Saturn return. I've seen literally at the exact moment I've read for one client who gave birth to her first child during her Saturn return, like at the exact time that
Oh
Saturn was like back
my
at the place that it was at. I know, isn't that wild? And as I'm saying that, it's literally 2222 on our recording time, so I was like, "Oh, that's cool."
goodness.
Um, and I've seen people get married and have babies and start their lives, really let their careers take off. I mean, like us, we really started this and leaned into the spiritual work. Yeah, it's really wild, but now looking back, I'm so grateful for it, as uncomfortable as I was during that season.
Hmm. Hmm. Same. Oh my gosh, so grateful. If I had continued to live the way I was living, yikes, big yikes.
Yeah, yeah.
So, for anyone listening in that age range, and you're like, what's happening? Um, we say with love, lean in, lean in, take a look at what this is bringing to the surface, and do the work around it.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay, so um, astrology is now like so a part of your life. I know this because I talk to you every day, and actually, it's like influenced me. Like I've become more interested in astrology, having you as a friend and having you as a resource. Um,
Mhm.
and like I love it. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. So I would love to hear how it's changed your life.
Oh gosh, I think just the understanding of what it is, how it works, allowed me to have context and language for who I am in this lifetime and really like gave me a clear map of what I'm supposed to do. And it's a permission slip as well to really lean into my characteristics, my skill sets, my areas of improvement. And it it just I have a hard time sometimes because I have my Mercury in Cancer. I have, like, most of my planets are in water signs, to be perfectly honest, and which is why my business is named what it is, and, sometimes it's hard to I can clairsentiently feel and experience my emotions, but I can't always describe how I'm feeling very well. And the reason in which that is because, I have my Mercury is in Cancer, my Sun's in Cancer, they're conjunct. And so having that awareness of like, oh, this is what it means in astrology, and like, referencing a book and then the book explaining like this is what this means to have these kinds of placements just helps me to better understand myself, and in turn, I can live a more aligned life.
Mm, yes. Yes, I would agree. Um, in that, like, it's kind of like as you learn about astrology, you're like, oh, this is me. And it almost helps you, it can really help with self love in that, like,
Yeah.
acceptance of who I am. And now that doesn't mean like, if there are light and dark, light and shadow sides to every sign, to every aspect, to every whatever placement. And there's always things for us to improve on. But um, it can feel really good to be like, I know for Shane and I'm Taurus sun, he's Aquarius sun. And in the early days of our relationship, this was very difficult. And I think we both were operating under the assumption of like, my way's right. The way I am is right. And the way he is right. And then we butt heads, and he tends to be more risky and out of the box thinking. And I tend to be more grounded and reliable and foundational. And so we would judge one another. And as I grew up and healed and started to learn about these systems, I was like, oh no, like if I didn't have Shane, I probably would have a hard time doing anything but the like straight track. I'm double Taurus. And
Mhm.
he keeps me like thinking bigger and outside of the box. And so I really appreciate that part of him now. But and so I have astrology to thank for that, or he and I have astrology to thank for that.
I love that, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So for people who are listening, who are like starting to get to know their charts and all that sort of thing, um, what are some ways that you work with your chart or astrology, like in a day-to-day way that people could work with as well?
It's so funny. I could see people assuming that I look at my chart every single day or have an awareness of like what's going on in my chart. And I certainly do for the bigger transits that are coming. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, like Jupiter's going to square Saturn in this part of my chart and it's hitting this house. And this is the theme that represents. But I I feel like I have a healthy relationship with it because I don't look at it in such a way that, like, I would control the situation, even though, like, if you were to know me personally, for those listeners out there, I absolutely come off as a controlling person, and we're working on that, but I just have an idea of, like, okay, this part of my chart is active. This is what this part of the chart and that house represents. I know that this is a theme that's gonna be coming up at this period of time, and I have a choice as to how I'm going to react to possible situations is
Hmm.
how my personal birth chart and astrology helps me.
Hmm. Okay. So you're generally looking at, big transits that are coming and you're going, okay, this is where that's going to land in my chart. This is how it may come up in my life. Let's see what happens. Kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Mhm.
Cool. Okay, well, speaking of big transits, let's talk about the friggin' elephant in the room, which is the eclipse season. I wish I had like a megaphone. Eclipse season is here, and today is lunar eclipse.
Mhm, mhm.
Today at the time that this airs, not today for Gabby and I, but
Close enough, right?
right, right.
We're in window.
It's like crazy for me to think that way. I'm not
Mhm.
usually yeah. Anyway, so Gabrielle, can you share? Let's start with the basics, and that is what is an eclipse?
An eclipse, oh my goodness. Okay, so an eclipse they happen at certain points in the sky, and the signs at which they tend to they occur in said signs, so like Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, and so forth. They'll happen in said points of the sky for about 18 months at a time. And an eclipse is when the moon or the planet gets in the way of the sun's light. And I want to be politically correct. So, a solar eclipse is when the moon gets in the way of the sun's light, and a lunar eclipse is when the earth gets in the way of the sun's light and hits the moon,
Oh,
to keep it simple. So, essentially, the sun's light in some capacity is afflicted, and that is why they'll tell you like, yes, we're having a lunar eclipse, yes, we're having a solar eclipse, but you don't really want to manifest in that period of time. So that would be like one ritual I would avoid, because the sun and the moon, the luminaries, which is what they're referred to, are not at their most like peak strongest points, I would say.
Okay, because you're saying the sun's light is somehow impacted in an eclipse or the moon.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
why do they always happen in pairs? Like, because we call it eclipse season. At
Yeah.
the time of this airing, it is the lunar eclipse. Do they always happen like a lunar and then a solar or whatever it is?
Yeah, they do. And so this one that we're happening right now is kind of funky because we're in that season of like, so the eclipses have been happening in the signs of Aries and Libra. So every sign has an axis point. So, like, if you go down the tunnel of an Aries, you're going to come out a Libra. And what's special about these, and vice versa, I should say. And what's special about this specific eclipse, it's kind of like ushering us into the next season of eclipses, which are going to transpire in 2025. So it's a partial lunar eclipse in the sign of Pisces. So we're going to have that lunar eclipse in Pisces, but then the solar eclipse is in Libra in October on the 2nd, I believe. And it's kind of like, all right, we're saying bye to the energy of Aries, Libra, and moving into the energy of Virgo, Pisces, which will happen next year. And so to see how that would affect you, you would essentially look at your chart and find the signs of right now, Aries, Libra. You could look at Pisces too. So you can see where you've been affected since the end of 2023 and 2024, and where you're going to be primarily affected in the signs of Virgo and Pisces and which houses they represent. And eclipses are very potent periods of time. So, eclipse season, it's actually 6 weeks prior to the first, either lunar or solar. And you'll feel the energy start to shift. And they're essentially like course correctors. So, like, and they're openings in kind of like a liminal space and time. And they're opportunities to shift timelines to, even though you're not supposed to do certain types of rituals around eclipses, you can almost like jump timelines in that period of time. And you'll see that energy start to kick off because 6 weeks prior to an eclipse, you'll start to notice more earthquakes happening around you or happening within the world. And just like world events, very much are timely and happen in synchronicity with eclipses and other transits that are going on. So hopefully that was clear and
Gosh,
made sense.
you said that, and I just realized I was in Montreal like 2 weeks ago, and there was an earthquake while I was there. I was
Uh-huh.
sleeping. I was so bummed. I was like, man, I slept through an
Mhm.
earthquake. But anyway,
We had one today. I know we're recording a couple of days before, but, like, we had one here today too.
oh, I bet you did. You guys get them all the time over in California.
It's like nothing.
You're on a fault line over there. But
Uh-huh.
okay, so let me make sure I understand correctly. So the Aries Libra eclipses have been going
Mhm.
on since like this time last year, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And they were like
Mhm.
this time last year, and then they were the spring of 2024, and then now they're like kind of finishing up in this eclipse season.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way, and perfect. The timing was just right on the money, and, they happen every 6 months, so you can consider, like, every 6 months to be kind of one of those windows in time in which an eclipse will likely occur, and the way that I like to look at it is, like, it's in the middle of a chapter within a book.
Okay. And so could we, this maybe I'm totally wrong with this, but could we say like, okay, well, this eclipse season is like finishing up the Aries, Libra, whatever nodes.
Uh-huh.
So the themes that showed up a year ago and then again 6 months ago are going to kind of wrap up in this eclipse season.
Absolutely, yeah. I would say that that is a perfect way to describe it.
Okay, I'm going to have to think about that.
You
My Libra's fourth house, my Aries is 10.
Ooh, I feel like I have an idea of what that could be. Mhm.
Anyway, okay, and then this is also the starting point of the eclipses for the next year and a bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and those will take place in the signs of Virgo, Pisces, which I think is so interesting, Angel, because Virgo, Pisces, it's the 6th and the 12th signs of the zodiac.
Uh-huh.
And in 2025, so if you add all the numbers in the year together, so 2 plus 2 plus 5, so that's 4 and 5 is 9.
Hmm.
9 is the end of a cycle within within numerology, because numerology works between numbers 1 to 9,
Mhm.
and Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. So I think 2025 is going to be there's going to be a lot of themes of endings and new beginnings occurring for sure, especially with the astrology that's going on. And the
Oh,
eclipses are going to be periods of time to look out for.
okay, everyone. So you heard it here. Aries and Libra cycles are ending with this eclipse season. Virgo, Pisces are starting. You can find where those are in your chart. Um, okay, exciting. So, what else do I want to watch? Um, so, rituals or practices around eclipses. You mentioned no manifesting because the sun is not like in its best light.
Mhm.
Anything that you'd recommend we do?
I think if you're going to do some type of ritual, I would call in a ritual or apply a ritual that focuses on endings,
Mm,
just because, and or new beginnings, because especially with these, since Aries is the first sign and Pisces is the last, I think that's very synonymous with,
mm,
what the planets are doing. Um, an extreme example, if you really want to get to it, and this is one of the things that one of my mentors had taught me, is that eclipses are just so potent for jumping timelines, but also for banishments, which in my divination practice, I don't practice banishments. But if you're really looking to just cut the cord, be done with an experience, job, person, setting that type of intention around an eclipse is a very potent time to do that.
interesting. Okay,
Mhm.
great. Um, and then, since at the date of this airing, it's the lunar eclipse in Pisces, what are like some Pisces themes, I guess, that might
Mhm.
be coming up with, the next set of eclipses over the next year and a half or whatever?
Yeah, so Pisces, it is a mutable water sign. It's the 12th sign of the zodiac. It has the energy of all of the 11 signs prior to it. And with Pisces energy, I just get like, and I know this people might say, like, well, isn't that kind of Scorpio? Yes, but I think because it has the energy of all the signs before, as well as Cancer and Scorpio, with the water signs that build up to Pisces, I think rebirthing energy is really applicable for Pisces, with this lunar eclipse that's occurring at the time of this podcast dropping. So, really, just like immersing yourself in like a body of water, or setting the intention when you're in the shower of like, okay, this is going to be the ending that I'm calling it, or the new beginning, and really just almost kind of making it spiritual. Which, haha, like, of course, we're on a spiritual podcast, but I just feel like this is such a potent time to really call in what you want for yourself within the next couple of years,
Mm,
because I really feel as though from this moment on, with what the astrology is doing, it's change is just going to be paramount, and it's going to be more obvious and blatant than it ever has been before within the collective consciousness.
I feel that. I really do. I feel like it's really dreamy too. Like I believe that Pisces is pretty like dreamy and out there, right? And
Totally.
it kind of feels like the change will be around dreaming, and maybe dreaming dreams that you would probably call outrageous today, but in a year from now, when that is your life, you're going to be like, what? Okay, you know.
It's Delulu energy,
Oh my gosh,
Angel.
the
That's what it is.
Lulu energy. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
And then is there anything, okay, Delulu energy can be great. It's good for us, I think, to expand and to think bigger and to dream bigger, especially those of us who have a lot of earth in our charts. But
mhm.
then, like, what would the sort of shadow side of Pisces be?
Oh, it's literally being in another dimension, the subconscious, kinda losing yourself. Pisces also rules over, substances and
Uh,
abusing substances, so it's kinda losing yourself in the delusion, so finding that balance between what's healthy, and what's not, I think is really important, and just casting intentions around that. But I just also feel like even though it's not an ideal time to manifest, calling in what you want, I think, is gonna be a little bit easier within the next 18 months, just because we're in such, like, a threshold of change that you're going to have an opportunity that we really haven't had in the last couple of years with everything going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gabrielle's not saying it, but what she's not saying, but is alluding to, is there are a lot of big transits in 2025,
Totally.
2026, right?
Yeah, and I like to host a like end of year workshop where I just go in like month by month and I'm like, hey, so I can tell you right now, for as like a treat for your listeners, the hot spots for next year are
Yeah.
certainly going to be
Spill the tea.
March and May.
Okay.
So if you have a birthday, like, and this is actually another thing too. I don't know Angel has a birthday in May, but you want to look to the astrology of the month and then the day, because that energy is going to follow you until your next birthday. So those who are born in the months of May and March and May are going to have, I think, really transformational years.
Ooh, okay. We love this friggin' teaser. I
Mhm.
already just like can see my March and May. Haven't shared with this community yet, but I can confirm transformation.
Mhm.
Not there
Mhm.
yet, but I feel it.
We'll have to do like a year ahead episode of some sort, or like
Oh yeah,
live or workshop or something.
yes, we'll have to do. I know. I was like, do I ask her now? And then I was like, I can feel people are overwhelmed. Let me just leave them with eclipses.
Yeah,
Everybody
yeah,
needs
yeah.
to chew on eclipses. Okay, so we're all feeling ready, and like, there's a lot of like, there can be a lot of fear that people feel around eclipse season. What do you have to say about that?
I mean, it can things can happen at any moment, any day, any time. So I think it's a choice to lean into that and to give that energy and, arguably maybe give your energy away. Although I do think that there are certainly things that tend to happen more in eclipses than not. So statistically, it's proven around full moons, but especially around eclipses, more car accidents tend to happen
Mm,
around that period of time. You'll just notice if you're walking around and you're just observant of people around you, people just kind of seem a little bit off. So the energy, it is very much potent within the collective, but I think it's all a matter of choice, especially if you're aware of it. And I think that's also why, like, I appreciate the art, the science, the modality, and my knowledge of it, and because I can work with it more easily and just have an idea of like what's coming.
hmm Yeah, and I feel like it needs to be said. I feel like my guides are asking me to say that just everyone know that like you can handle anything. You can. I know you might not
Hmm.
believe that, but you absolutely can. And and sometimes these things, much like the Saturn return that we were talking about earlier, they are for your like to get you into a more aligned path, and
Totally.
ultimately you will be happy for it. I think
Oh,
Gabrielle, you've called them cosmic course correctors before, and I never really forget that one because I think that's accurate.
thank you for saying that and for that reminder. And I completely agree. We are divinely protected, and leaning into that as opposed to like the fear also is empowering.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna move on from eclipses, friends. So for those who are like new to looking at their chart, I was with a group of women on the weekend, and I was like trying to guess that. I love playing that game where I like guess what might be in their chart. And so they were looking up their charts and stuff. Um, what resources would you recommend people go to if they want to look up their birth chart?
I think so. The way in which you're able to cast your chart on certain websites that are free, one of them is astro.com. Astro Charts is a popular one as well. I would probably start there because Astro can be a little bit more complex. But you essentially need your full date of birth, month, day, and year, your place of birth, and then your time of birth, which you can oftentimes find on a birth certificate depending on where you were born, if they provide that or not. And then you'll put that information into a website. And then from there, it's going to cast your birth chart. And you can look and see what's your sun, your moon, your rising, and the rest of the planetary cosmic energies that influence your incarnation in this lifetime.
Beautiful. Yes. And I think, guys, like to start, if you're new, just look at your sun, moon, and rising. And then if you're a little further along, look at where these eclipses are. That might be a good second step since it's so relevant to today.
Mhm. Are your, Virgo, Pisces in that 3rd and ninth for you?
Yes,
Yeah, oh, okay. Yeah, that makes so much sense.
it
Okay,
really
cool.
does. Yeah. Especially the Pisces ninth. I'm like, mhm.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. What about you? Where's this lunar eclipse landing for you?
Oh gosh, so I am a so it's kind of wedged in between my 1st house, maybe 12th, and then my 7th. So 1st and 7th, and those are the houses of identity, personal change, the essence of your soul, and 7th is partnerships,
Mm.
marriage, business, contracts.
Mm.
So I feel a big shift coming in those areas as we chatted about at the beginning.
Yes. Okay, I feel that. And so, sorry, Virgo was seventh? The Pisces.
My Virgo is like 6th to the 7th. I'm thinking of Placidus, but in whole sign, I would be in the well, Libra would be my 7th, yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's explain for everyone because this was the other thing that came up when I was with these women who were looking up their charts. They're showing me their Placidus charts, and I'm used to looking at whole sign, and I could not really explain the difference. So, could you explain
Totally,
the difference
mhm.
for listeners?
So, yes, thank you for asking. It's so funny. I was thinking about this and then I was like, okay, I need to be prepared if this comes up in another podcast because I was just asked this question on another podcast and I feel like I didn't have a good answer for it. So I wrote it down this time to be accurate. So I practice Placidus because I work with numerology and Placidus gets very into the numbers within the wheel, whereas whole sign doesn't. So whole sign it's dependent on the main difference is how the houses within the chart are divided. So, house division within whole sign astrology, there are 12 signs within the zodiac and each span 30 degrees. And so within whole sign, the chart begins based off of where your rising sign is at. So it's determined by the rising sign, which is also known as the ascendant. And essentially, so like if you were an Aries rising, you're essentially going to have a chart that represents like the first house is going to start with Aries, and then the other houses of the wheel will follow with significant and sequential. Sorry, I would say this the following signs that follow. That doesn't make sense, but in my brain it did as I was saying it out loud. Whereas with Placidus, it's a little bit more complex because it's using a mathematical formula that takes into account the latitude of the birth location and the Earth's tilt. And that in turn results in unequal house sizes, which is why some houses look a little bit bigger and some houses might have two signs within one.
Mm,
And the difference is so pretty much like how the houses are divided. So whole sign is going to look a little bit more even, Placidus is not, and how an astrologer is going to interpret the charts.
I see. Oh, I didn't realize that about Placidus. Okay, so
Mhm.
everyone, whole sign, you're going to have a sign per house, dit, 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 like a perfect little pizza.
Yep,
Placidus,
exactly.
some of your signs may span multiple houses. You know what? I'm just going to show you guys examples. Whole sign, that's me. And I'm sure I have someone's Placidus in here. Hmm, I don't. Well, that's all I got for you guys. Whole sign.
Um, yeah, I was gonna also say, like, the size of the houses also is affected by how close you are born or how close you are not born to the equator. Not wild.
Yeah, I mean, it really makes sense. You're like, why would it be, why would they be perfect 30 degrees when you take into account, physics? I don't know.
I know, and then it's like then you just there's so many rules in astrology, and I'm just like, if anyone out there is interested in studying or learning, I will certainly eventually teach it. However, there's just so many rules that, like, once you have a foundation and somewhat of a knowledge base, like, just start reading charts because there's not one person that's ever gonna know all there is to know about astrology because of how long it's been around.
And it's kind of beautiful. Like every astrologer has a different sort of specialty and messaging. And so I think that I mean, that's kind of what I love about it. There's a lot of creativity, there's a lot of intuition built in. Um,
Mhm. I
so this probably made you guys hungry to get your chart read. So Gabrielle, can you share what services you offer?
Yeah, oh my gosh, I would be honored, thank you for asking. I certainly do birth chart readings, I do transit readings, I have my signature offering, which is yes.
Explain to the listeners what a transit reading is.
Oh, okay, love this. So you have the natal chart, right? So it's a picture of the sky at the exact moment of your birth. And so that can be interpreted as is. Another component to a birth chart reading is a transit reading. And the transit readings are taking into account where the planets are doing now and what they're going to be doing over however long you're interested in knowing. So it's good to maybe look at 3 to 12 months ahead.
Okay.
And it's a predictive reading. So you're
Mm,
like, "Okay, Saturn's gonna be in Aries in 2026. How is this gonna affect me?" And then, that's what the reading is focused on. It's a little bit more predictive and things you can look
yeah.
forward to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those are fun.
And I feel like, friends, you probably, if you don't know your natal chart, you should probably start there. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good entry point. So we have that, and then I have the life path reading, and so because I practice, um Placidus. I use Placidus astrology, and I also apply numerology, and I have an intuitive component to my readings. That's the one that's just the works, I would say. And
Mm-hmm.
then alongside that, I do solo psychic readings as well, just if we're not including the astrology. And then the other pillar within my business, aside from the podcast, is consulting. And I am building up the pillar that focuses on human design and using human design to help other intuitives or just people in business, within their own business as well.
Yes. Okay. So the consulting is business consulting, friends. If you're
Yeah.
starting up a business, this one not only studied business but is rocking it in her own business
Um,
while she works a
I
full-time
received.
job. May I add?
A Angel knows all about this via the voice notes.
Via the voice notes. Oh gosh. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that. I personally feel like very well equipped going into this eclipse season. And also, like, I don't know, my energy feels like excited and like
Yeah.
something's arriving. Um,
I I'm so excited. I don't know if you all listening can tell, but I was really excited just to like talk to my girl, and my face hurts from smiling so much, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I could talk about this all day." And like, it's later in the evening that we're recording this app, but I'm like, "This is my third win, guys. I'm ready to go." So anyways, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure as always, and I could talk to you forever.
and you will via the voice notes. No, but I love you so much.
True,
And
true.
thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy life to join this community. This will not be the last time that we see you.
Aw, love you, friend. Thank you so much.
Love you so much. Thanks, everybody, for joining our little friendship love affair here. And go check out Gabrielle. Agua Astrology, I'll put all of her links in the show notes, but Agua Astrology is her astrology business. And you can also check out the Spiritual Sisters podcast. They have so much good stuff. I know you guys love going down spiritual rabbit holes. Those rabbit holes are there for you. So go down them. Okay, that's it. Bye.